What's up, guys? This is Spraggy back with Poker VIP for part 2 of our Betsafe series. We're playing 2 tables of 20 no limit today on Betsafe. We're in a limp pot over here on table 1 with the Jack and the 4 because we're in the big blind. This guy, who we think is a recreational player, limped to the button. We obviously checked and we've not taken a stab at it as we get the video going here. We are back for 30 minutes today with this part 2 of a 4-part series. I gotta let you in on a little secret. I have previously recorded parts 2, 3, and 4 of this series, but the quality was, because of a recording error on my end, the quality was too low. So we're doing them all again. We're doing part 2, 3, and 4 again. So technically for me, this is part 5, 6, and 7, but the other videos were completely unusable. But it's good to be back in these Betsafe games because they are very good. We had pretty good success in the videos that you haven't seen whilst I've been grinding, I guess, in the hands that didn't make the cut. So hopefully we can have some entertaining, interesting stuff going on today and see what we can get done. As ever, we're going to take a quick look around the table and see who we think is a recreational, who's a regular, and what not. Pretty sure this guy's going to be recreational. I don't know why I have a red tag on him. I think I just put that on, actually, for some reason. But anyway, we're going to give him the green tag for suspected fish, seeing as he keeps limping into pots. So we're just going to ISO him really wide here from the button to 60 cents. Sex Machine 7, the classily named player here, is going to be a regular. I've seen him around a lot, and we're going to give him the red tag for regular. We get called in the big blind by Trishy85, who again is not in for a full stack. So we're going to assume recreational for now until we pick up on some of their tendencies and see where their player type is headed. We do flop top pair. I think we should bet here for a little bit of value and protection, multi-way, against people who are probably going to call quite wide. On the right-hand table, we could definitely just call in the big blind. I think maybe I prefer 3-betting here. With the ace-jack off versus an undergun open, I don't think we want to call too much. Let's go with it. Let's go with a 3-bet. I think it's slightly better than a call, so we'll just bump it up to 260, put the squeeze on. The problem with flatting hands like the ace-jack off is on ace-high boards here versus an under-the-gun range, we're almost certainly in bad shape when we get bet into over multiple streets. We have reasonable blockers to the sort of hands that this guy opens under the gun that would continue. Stuff like ace-king, pocket jacks, ace-queen, pocket aces. So it's more likely he opens, if he's opening all his pairs or suited connectors, more likely he has those when we hold these blockers. And given we don't think our hand is too profitable of a call, I mean, it probably is a profitable call, but I think it's a more profitable 3-bet. Obviously, when he shoves, we're done with it. But we could go either way there. I think calling would probably be okay, but 3-betting definitely going to be profitable too. Potentially more so. Unfortunately, we lose our recreational guy over here with the pocket 7s versus ace-queen in a flip. Would love to see a reload, but time is ticking for Okey Pokey. It doesn't look like he's coming back. Oh, he is coming back for another 10. Maybe he's not a full-on recreational. Maybe he just likes burning for 10 rather than the 20. Like I say, obviously that hand very standard for him to get in 7s there, I would imagine. So maybe not completely like a complete fish or a bad player or whatever you want to call him. I have a note on this player here as well. Let's check that out. Cold 4-bet folded from the small blind versus a button 3-bet. So this was probably just for me to know that this guy actually has a cold 4-bet bluffing range, because a lot of players don't have a cold 4-bet bluffing range at all, especially at 20 NL. We get defended by Trishy, who I think is probably defending quite wide. We're actually going to go for just a half-pot c-bet here, just to try and deny him some equity and capitalize on the dead money, take down the pot. We get min-raised on the flop. Obviously, we're done with it. But he's still going to have hands like Jack 10 in his range, and the best and easiest way for us to win the pot against that hand would be to bet. So that is what we did, and he min-raised. And obviously, we have to fold. In those spots, we likely wouldn't fold any ace, obviously. We have some 9s in our range. We have plenty of aces to bet call. Against Sex Machine, I think I'm going to 3-bet again, rather than call this one. Again, this is reasonably good blockers. Not a profitable call versus this mid-position open, but we want to have some bluffs here. Something like King Jack off with the blockers is a good place to start. On table 1, we flop top pair, so we're just going to lead. into this limp pot. Okie pokey, limping the button again. Certainly isn't something someone who's playing really well is going to do too often, so pretty happy about that. We see an ace on the turn, which isn't a great card. I think we'll check. Probably not going to fold right away. He can have definitely a decent amount of ace-x in his range, despite the limp. I think we're probably just check folding at this point. But we do end up winning. River's not a particularly worrying card. I don't think he has too many 2s in his range. Potentially ace-2, but a good chance that bets the turn. And 6-7 gets there, but other than that, the 3 is not a particularly scary card. I think he probably had some sort of showdown value since a lot of his air is either folding flop or going to stab the ace turn. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a 5x here, and he has the 8-4 for bottom pair on the flop. 8-4 offsuit. So I just said maybe Okie Pokey isn't an out-and-out sort of bad player, but limping 8-4 offsuit on the button is certainly what's the word I'm looking for? Terrible. That's what it is. Terrible. So definitely a player we can hopefully get into some pots with and put ourselves into some profitable situations against. Table 2, in terms of the recreationals to reg ratio, I think is pretty reg heavy. Just based on the screen names, like I Need Your Money seems like a very reggy sounding screen name. Win or Die as well. Bust You All is playing multiple tables. I've played with this guy, like I say in the videos that never saw a release, that he's a regular. Sex Machine's a regular. So definitely not the best table, but for the sake of keeping the action flowy, nice and flowy here on the video, we're just going to stay on the table. Our player who likes to limp a lot has come in with a 5x raise. I'm not particularly concerned. I think he's going to be pretty splashy in general. So we're just going to make it 280 with the ace queen of clubs. And if he wants to play for his €8.60, which is just less than 50 big blinds, then we're happy to do so with a hand this strong. And he ends up with the ace-6. We get it in pretty good. He flops an absolute monster. But, we end up chopping the pot. Which, when you see 3, 4, 5, you're pretty relieved to chop, I guess, by the end. But Okie Pokey certainly looks like a fun player here to gamble, have a good time. Nothing wrong with that, but obviously should be profitable for us. €2 open now. The price of poker is going up on table 1. So this sort of player is generally going to be sort of a ticking time bomb, where this €8 or €10 that he's got hold of is not going to stay around for very long. So we need to make sure that we're taking some thinner spots, some thinner stack-offs against him. They're going to be profitable with a little bit of a wider range than we normally would. Like ace-queen, for example. We're not happy stacking off there against any regular, obviously. But this guy, like I say, seems very, very willing just to gamble at the moment. Table 1 certainly seems the more interesting of the two so far. But it can be pretty interesting and worthwhile, especially for making a video here, to get into some spots with the regulars, because someone like Okie Pokey, it's kind of, although we have to make some adjustments, the adjustments are kind of obvious, a little straightforward. Just be willing to stack off a little bit lighter with him, never bluff him, that sort of thing. But where you're really going to find an edge is finding exploits against the regulars in the games, because if we're winning money here, obviously there's a decent amount of value, but our day in, day out grind is going to be against players like this, with maybe 1 recreational or 2 if we're lucky at the table. So it's good to know how to exploit regulars as well. And there's certainly some stuff we can do. Hopefully we get into some spots to demonstrate that. If not in this part, in parts 3 or 4, which will be following on from this. Table 1, King 9 is going to be a call versus the open. We have position. People tend to open pretty wide from the small blind as well. Some people a little wider than they should. Very, very happy with the flop. We know nothing about Bubble Double. He could be one of those people who opens really wide. He could be really tight. Obviously, we're not going to fold, and I don't think raising would be a good idea. It's a little bit thin. We want to keep some top pairs in our calling range on the flop. Much more standard play is just a call. And obviously, most likely have to just call down. He's going to have a very decent amount of bluffs on this texture. He's even going to be value betting some worse hands, something like 10-9, Queen 9, Jack 9. pocket eights, etc. When all the draws miss, this is really good for us. Simply because if he does have a 9, he's going to bluff catch us. Ace 9 plus would probably bet river itself a value, so we're going to actually pot the river with the king and the 9. Just because he's either folding something like Queen 10 of hearts, or 5-6 is probably not going to call ever. So we'll just go for max value against weaker 9s, maybe even something like 7s or 8s. Like I say, when all the draws missed, I think it's good just to make the pot size bet. If he's got a bluff catcher, he's going to be suspicious, and we can maximize our value, hopefully. And he ends up calling the pot size bet. We will go in and see what called, and it's Queen 9. So like I say, he's either got a misdraw himself and is just going to check fold, or he's got a 9, and I think, like I said, I think Ace 9 or pocket 10s plus is going to value bet itself on the river. So if he's got a 9, he's never going to fold when the board runs out as it has. So we'll just go max value with a pot size bet, and that works out well. It's also not really a river we want to bluff too often, and there's numerous reasons for that. One, like I say, I think if he himself has got air, he's just going to triple barrel. Once he checks, he's going to have a decent amount of 9x that can check call, and even some worse stuff. Secondly, a lot of the hands that we don't have showdown value with that get to the river, it was the board texture was 9, 4, 3, 3. So a lot of the hands that we get to the river that don't have showdown value is what, 5, 6, 6, 7. 6-7 we probably fold turn. So I guess the only other straight draw we have is the 5-6. And that river to 5. So if we river a 5, we're probably just taking a showdown, given that we think he can have a decent amount of air and we're never getting him to fold a 9. So our 5x would just take showdown. Our hearts probably don't want to bluff too often. Some of the time we're going to have the nut flush that can take showdown with ace high. But the other times that we have hearts, we actually block heart combos that he can have. So if we bluff with our hearts, then it's more likely he doesn't have the heart combos, he has the 9x combos. Since we have the hearts, it's harder for him to have the hearts. So our hearts don't actually want to bluff too many rivers there, especially when our opponent checks. Therefore, it's not a river we want to bluff too often, so we're not worried about having to use a pot size bet for our bluffs, if that makes sense. Like if we wanted our bluffs to have to bet smaller, then obviously potting our value hands sucks a little bit, but we don't have too many bluffs, so we'll just pot there. I guess, I'm not sure what our bluffs would be at that river. Maybe we'd have to turn... it's really hard. Maybe we would have to turn like 5-6 into a bluff, but I guess if we never expect a 9x to fold, then we can probably just take an exploitable line against 20 players and not have any bluffs, to be honest. That's quite possible. Quite possibly the case. For the most part, or most of our bets at 20 NL, especially on a site like Betsafe, which is probably going to be a softer pool than something like PokerStars. Most of our bets should be value bets. The only reason we ever bluff, of course, is to make sure that people don't start folding everything against us. That's the only reason we ever bluff in poker, is because imagine you go to your casino and there's a guy who you know for a fact only plays aces. Eventually, people stop playing with that bloke, or they stop putting any money in when he puts money in. So eventually that guy has to say, okay, I'm going to play aces and I'm going to play 6-7 suited. So now he's going to start getting action again, right? Because he's got some value bets, he's got some bluffs. So poker is kind of like a more complex version of that, in that the only reason we bluff is so that people actually ever pay us off. What you'll find at most market stakes games is people never stop calling you. Because it's hard for them to build up a sample. It's not like the bloke at the casino. We recognize his face, we know who he is. Oh, it's the guy who plays aces. For a lot of the time when you're playing online, people don't really pay that much attention. Eventually they'll build up a sample on you with a HUD, but they still probably make mistakes where they don't stop paying you off. They just keep calling and calling and calling. So we don't actually need to bluff too often. Most of our bets should be for value, especially in softer games like this on Betsafe. I hope that explanation of why we bluff makes sense. It's just to make sure that we keep getting paid off. But if your opponents aren't going to stop paying you off, you don't need to bluff that much. Obviously, we've got to bluff sometimes, and there's obviously some profitable spots for us to bluff where we think opponents are playing too tight or they are overfolding. I think a potential example of that, from what I've seen, is to turn raises. Certainly river raises in the right spots, but you can't go crazy. But a lot of regulars play very, very tight to a river raise. That's because it's the most expensive bluff, because the pot's going to be larger by the river, and people tend not to bluff it at all at micro stakes. So there are certainly some river bluffs that you can find, but like I say, you can't go too crazy. It's very hard to rep too many value combos. You've got to make sure we have the right blockers, etc. But if there were spots, I'm just spitballing some spots where we might be able to bluff a little bit excessively at micro stakes, probably turn and river raises. That's because nobody really does it, so nobody expects it. But that's a story for another day. Hopefully in the next parts 2, 3, and 4 of this series, maybe we'll find some fun turn raises and river raises, but we'll see. No promises, but we'll see. Table 1, we're actually going to c-bet here. We're in position, and I'm just going to try and deny equity with my ace high. A lot of the time, obviously, we're just folding out hands worse than our own, but I tend to c-bet quite wide in position anyway, just because I think people don't really float too much, or they don't really defend too much. We're probably going to bet again on the turn. It is another over to something like ace-5, 5-6. That's definitely going to call flop. And we do have some reasonable decisions on rivers where we can bet 3 streets. Again, if he's got a hand like pocket 5s or pocket 3s, 9-10, it's probably going to raise the turn because he's starting to get a little bit bored of the texture. See the rabbit cam here, the queen of clubs, that would be an excellent card for us to bet again if we got called. He's still going to have some stubborn 9x. We have the king blocker, the king of clubs blocker for backdoored flushes. So that's another card that really changes the texture by the river. So we'd probably have given that the 3 streets. As played, the 2 was enough. I realised the last 5 minutes of that were a little bit waffly. Talking about more general stuff rather than the hands that we were playing, but it's hopefully all good information. As ever, folks, comments, queries, questions for me. If you're watching on YouTube, whack them in the comments. If you're watching on the Poker VIP website, you can also put them in the comments. I will check periodically if you guys have got any questions. I'm more than happy to discuss hands with you. If you think I messed up somewhere, I'm more than willing to discuss. This is kind of a close spot to checking back and betting. In situations where I don't think that we can get 3 streets of value, I'd be more inclined to check behind, especially because it kind of sucks for us to get check raised here. What notes do I have on this guy? He has a cold 4-bet bluffing range, so probably one of the more reasonable regulars. I think we are going to check behind here. And this turn is obviously not great. It's not a complete disaster. We pick up 2 pair. I think we're going to check again and potentially go for a little value bet on the river. It's only a very small pot. I would have expected to hear from a jack at this point. I'm kind of tempted just to bet pot, actually. If he has a hand like ace-10, queen-10, he's probably not folding it at this point. So we'll just max value once again. It's also a spot where he doesn't expect me to have many jacks because I check back flop and turn. So he can definitely hero call us. He snap folded though, so he likely just had nothing. Like I say, against a weaker opponent, I don't mind going for a bet on the flop and then looking for 3 streets, but kind of tough on a lot of runouts to get 3 streets there. King 10 off seems fine to raise from the cutoff. Probably the weakest offsuit king that I do raise though. We get called from the button by Sago, who I know nothing about, and flop a pretty reasonable hand for us to see bet. Him calling in position, he's going to have some broadways, he's going to have some suited connectors, obviously some pocket pairs. I think a lot of his pocket pairs just give up on this flop, something like 7s, 6s, 8s, 2s, 3, 4s. So we're going to make money by c-betting. Obviously we have a gut shot ourselves if he does continue. Looks like our recreational's all in on the turn, gets called by queen 2, and ace-king is not going to be the best hand. Hopefully Trishy85 reloads as well, because we've just lost the other fish from here. Fun player, I think, is the new accepted terminology. I'm a little bit old school, sorry. Trishy is gone. So these games seem to be quite reg heavy at this point. Hopefully we get someone recreational come and sit in here. Spice things up a little bit. But if not, like I say, no real bother. No real bother. Nah, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Even 5-handed. Especially when there's no obvious spots anyway. I mean, if there was a huge whale here, it's probably still too wide. In fact, it's way too wide. Jack 9 suited would probably be okay. It's hard when you're two-tabling, though. You know what I mean? You've got to stay disciplined when you're two-tabling. Because it's a little bit slower action. Especially, again, on Betsafe, the hands are a little bit slower. So we must stay disciplined with our ranges. We're going to defend here with Queen Jack suited. The flop is pretty interesting. I definitely think we can float for this price. But obviously we've got way better hands now. Maybe we can just fold here. Not sure. Doesn't seem too horrible. I don't think we should bet though. King Jack's good. And we will defend the big blind with Queen Jack suited hands. Definitely strong enough just to call. And I don't think we necessarily want to 3-bet here. With the new player at the table, we don't really know too much about him. I think we're going to play fine in a single raise pot. We're going to call flop. Probably call turn if he bet again. We will go for a value bet now at the river. I don't think he has too many kings since he didn't bet turn. Certainly can have some weaker king X that want to pot control. He can definitely have river to queen with something like queen 10, queen 9 that bets and gives up. So we'll just go for value from that. I think something like 120 is going to be okay. I was just going to say, it really sucks if we get raised. You can certainly have ace-10, 9-10 that choose not to barrel. We can obviously chop. I don't think he can have king-queen. But we're really calling to either chop with the other queen-jack, or we pay off a straight. So I actually think we just fold here. This comes back to what I spoke about earlier in this video about nobody really bluff raises rivers. So it's kind of really hard for him to bluff. Once he checks back turn and then raises the river, I would imagine it's nutted way more often than not. So we'll just make the discipline fold, I think, with the queen and the jack. Don't see us really beating anything that raises river at 20 NL. It's a very unorthodox bluffing line if he does take it to check back turn and then raise river. I don't see, or haven't seen, anyone really doing so in these games. I wouldn't expect it to be a reasonable line. Once you see a check, more often than not, players at these stakes tend to disassociate from the pot, in that if they're going to bluff, they usually like give it the beans, they go the whole hog, and they just like slam it in. Once they check once, they're pretty much, their bluffing range, or their bluffing frequency reduces quite significantly. It's very odd for someone to bluff, then check, then start bluffing again, which is why bet check bet is such a strong line. And in this instance, once he checks back turn and then raises a river, just don't imagine it's a bluff ever, or not enough of the time to warrant calling with queen jack. Even though our hand is super strong, it's all about relative hand strength. Like 2-pair is obviously very good, but against his range, relative to his range, if we're talking about relative hand strength, then it's just not going to be good, because his range is straights and some 2-pairs. And by some 2-pairs, I probably just mean occasionally king-queen if he checks back turn, but queen-jack, and we chop with that. So I think folding is fine. Long story short, we get 3-bet. And we get a call. We're going to put in the 4th bet with king-king. Just going to make it 6, make it a little bit bigger because win or die comes along in the small blind. Kind of odd that he cold calls the small blind. I'm going to assume his range is something like 10s, jacks, queens even. Ace-king. If he flats a hand like queens here, I think he can potentially reshove. But he ends up just folding, so maybe like 9s, 10s, jacks that finds a fold there. People do play pretty tight pre-flop in 20 Euro games, which is why cold 4-bet bluffing can be quite effective, and 4-bet bluffing in general can be quite effective too. So definitely good to find some spots for that. Like I say, hopefully part 2, 3, and 4, we find some spots where we can put in some 4-bet bluffs. I think we 4-bet bluffed a hand pre-flop in part 1 actually. That actually worked. It was about the only thing that did work in Betsafe part 1 video. I think we've turned a small profit this video. Maybe not too many huge pots, but definitely some interesting concepts and some interesting hands to discuss. And it looks like Marco Mank is recreational. Just joined the table here. What's this? Bad beat jackpot. No thanks. We've got to put in 2 cents per hand. Oh, am I already opted in? Oh no, I have to click this, right? I don't want to opt in, thank you. Probably a bad idea. I don't think you guys saw that pop up, did you? No, I don't think so. Nope. Table 2, we have the Jack 9 off. We'll defend women open, I would imagine, or defend in general here. To the button steal. Obviously, a sex machine 3-bets, we're just going to disappear. Bit of a pop brewing on the left-hand side. Hopefully, Marco Mank finds a double up. We'd rather money was in his hands than bust you all because, you know, this guy's probably playing a lot better than Mark is. No offense, Mark. Of course, whenever I say someone's playing bad at poker or whatever, or they're recreational, they're a fun player, or they're a fish or whatever, nothing wrong with that. A lot of people just play poker for fun, and that's cool. I think we can potentially check raise here with the Jack 9. We do have a gut shot. People tend to see bet from the button quite wide. And we can definitely rep some decent value hands. Queen 5, King 5, King Queen, pocket 5s. We see a limp from Mark. We have a pretty strong hand. I'm actually going to raise 4x here. Just to hopefully isolate Mark in the pot. And we're going to bet real small. Let's bet 70 cents. We don't have to go particularly big. We just want to encourage a little bit of action on what is quite a dry board. So we can bet just under 2 and be able to shove the river. Or if we bet 2, that puts 7 in with 550 behind. So something like this is going to be fine. And we call off. He's got ace-3 offsuit. And Mark has somewhat donated there with his 50 big blinds. Queen Jack offsuit, we could definitely 3-bet versus a cutoff open, or we could fold. I think we're just going to fold. Versus a button open, I would definitely 3-bet here, but we've not really seen too much from I Need Your Money. He just folded to a check raise, but given the fact I just check raised him a hand before, I don't know, he might think I'm starting to get out of line. We're just going to fold the Queen Jack off out of position. It really sucks as a call out of position, so it's going to be a 3-bet or a fold. I think in this instance I'm okay just folding. Unfortunately, Mark has yanked his router out of the wall. So disgusted was he with that stack off, and looks like he's going to leave the table. But we managed to stack him before he left, which is good. If this wasn't a video, it's always important. Like I say, this table on the right is pretty dry. It's just regular versus regular versus regular versus regular. 5 times, 6 times, whatever. So there's not going to be too much value, especially with the rake at market stakes being very high. There's not really too much value in sitting at tables like this all day. What we want to be doing is jumping about lobbies as much as we can, trying to get into games with people like Mark, because as you can see, taking money off Mark is just a whole lot of an easier proposition. Obviously, we need to learn how to hold our own in these games, so when people like Mark aren't around. And that's going to help with our development as poker players. But in terms of table selection, we should always be table selecting, and someone like Mark is just too good value to pass up. You'll find this happens a lot as well. Once the recreational player busts, the regs tend to move on. This table breaking now, all of them sitting out, which is a bit of a shame, but that's just the way of the world. Anywho, that brings to a conclusion our 30 minutes of part 2. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video. Like I said earlier, comments, queries, questions, whack them into me, and I will see what I can do. Always happy to engage in conversation. But until next time, I will catch you later, and thanks very much for watching.